Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience and for waiting for us to get started. We're excited about this event today and glad to have you here. If you would please put locate your name and location in the chat. Let us know where you're from and even your affiliation. That will be wonderful. We've got people here from actually around the world. We've had many people registering globally, in addition to certainly local to Oregon and throughout the United States as well. Someone's from New Jersey. I think I would give a lot of credit to the international audience, to Andrew Millison, because he shared this event on his vast network, and that I think has kind of scaled our exposure and our audience, which is exciting. There's someone from Portland. Obviously, we have a lot of people here from Portland, Eugene, Corvallis, of course, which is where the Post Carbon Institute is based. Washington State, good. A lot of people from the Pacific Northwest, which is, oh, Maui. Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much. Please keep letting us know where you are in the chat. And thank you everyone for being here. We're really pleased to be hosting this collaborative event today. We think it's going to be a very unique experience. We have been working hard in the background to prepare for this event and to line up all the speakers and the specifics, and we're really appreciative that you're devoting your Saturday to this important topic and these important issues. We're hosting this event in partnership with the Post Carbon Institute, with author and senior fellow Richard Heinberg. And we're also hosting this in partnership with the Trout Institute and thepivot.earth, and our many other speakers and partners. We feel that this is going to be a landmark event. To our knowledge, we don't know of any other conversation like this that's taking place. And we are really pleased and excited to share this with you and share all the speakers and the knowledge with you. We hope you'll be inspired and challenged to take what you learned today back to your houses and your homes, your families, and of course your neighborhoods, and share this with them. We have numerous sponsors, partners, and our local hosts. They're numerous to mention, and I'm going to give them much more credit as we wrap up the event. Before we begin with introducing the speakers, I want to introduce Laughing Helen Farrell, who's going to give us the land acknowledgement and an opening blessing. Laughing Helen Farrell is a descendant of the Choctaw and the Saslaki and the Taino nations, the living land in the traditional homelands of the Kalupia people, and that's now known as Eugene, Oregon. She's a pipe carrier, a sacred song carrier, tradition keeper, and she dedicates her life to helping humans understand their place in the wheel of life. I'd like to introduce and welcome Helen. Thank you so much, Helen, for being here and doing the opening for us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And just in the pronunciations, Choctaw, Taino, Tsarki, and Kalpuya. We appreciate everybody coming today. So the Indigenous people have always known that in order to sustain ourselves, and not just ourselves, but all of our relations, which means not just humans, but everything on the planet, that we need to work together. The community is our most valuable asset. And so I'm very excited that different communities from different places are starting to come together and start discussing these things. And the reason that we start things off in this way is because around the world, we all knew that we are physical beings, but we are also mental beings and emotional beings and spiritual beings or energetic beings, whatever words you want to use. And so you need to acknowledge all of these things before we start discussions so that all of those things feel welcome and invited into the space, and it creates a container for safety and wish to share with each other with honor and respect. And so we put up these songs in this way to honor our ancestors and our helpers and all of the relations that are seen and unseen, to welcome them, to invite them, and to have this a full and whole conversation. And also so that we can be led and guided in the words that we share with each other. And this these traditions also in the way that we use our voice. Our voice is the signature that we each have, that is our own personality in all that is. And so when we sing these songs, we engage our voice with the voice that has been used for at least tens of thousands of years, maybe longer, depending on which science you believe in. This way was laid down by many, many, many before I was here. And this will continue if I do a good job in keeping it alive, and we keep the earth alive, and we keep each other alive, and we thrive. They will be continue to be passed down, so that this river, you can just step into this river, and you get all of that strength and knowledge and wisdom by stepping into the river, because that's its design. Is that if you join in the prayer, then you step into the river of all of that wisdom and knowledge. So this is a prayer from the Monoyote in California. It's the one that's asking to be saying right now. And it's loose translation, because our translations aren't necessarily verbal. But the loose translation is to wake up the mountains, and to wake up that within yourself, so that you can be a part of what is happening right now. And so that we can leave things better, not only for ourselves, the rest of our lives, but for our family, for our families' families, for our communities, for this planet, and as it ripples beyond, because there's way more than we understand. Ah! 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 We come to you today in a sacred and honorable way, thanking you for this life today, for this day today, for this time today, for each of us to come and to speak our truth and to join together for the solutions that are necessary for our continued health and happiness. I invite the good spirits in the directions. I invite the good spirits of all of our ancestors. I invite the good spirits of our helpers I invite the good spirits of the four elements. I invite the good spirits of the ancestors of this land and in the lands in which we are all residing in right now. And may that web be woven in a way that we are connecting in the grid with this solution. And that'll be for the health and the happiness for all of my relation for many generations to come. I give honor and thanks to all that has come today. We invite you, we welcome you, we honor you, we hold you in reverence. We open ourselves up that we may be a part of and continue on so that our people may live. All my relations.
Thank you, Laughing Helen. That was beautiful. We really appreciate this. And I'd now like to introduce our co-moderators, Melanie Carloni and Mayana Wine. They're with the Pivot.Earth. And at the Pivot.Earth, Mayana and Melanie and their team, their organization is focused on nourishing community-driven values-aligned visions for living soil projects into practical and actionable frameworks. They know that building soil and building living soil through frameworks for mutuality on all levels fosters the healthy communities that we envision for the new world and that we are building together. I'd like to now introduce both Melanie and Mayana.
Thank you so much, Louisa. We are very honored to be here and join all of you in sharing all this important knowledge and have a debate and a dialogue around these important issues and questions. So I'll hand it to Melanie to do a grounding and introduce yourself. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayana. So I'm a physical therapist by training who's gotten very wrapped up in living soil for a very good reason. And I'd like to bring us today into a little deeper inquiry than what Helen just started us with. And that is that we know that practices rooted in Indigenous wisdom and now in science show that when we slow down to go faster, it really brings a lot of benefit to all of us. Research shows us that practices that calm the nervous system, slowing our breath, for example, impact not just our immune system, but our immune system, our cardio, every bit of us becomes benefited by these practices. So today we're just going to have a small collective grounding. You can probably even still feel the echo of Helen's introduction. So I want to invite you all, if you will, to take a breath and close your eyes or cast them down and just feel the space you're in. Maybe close your eyes and just let your internal awareness focus, feeling your seat, your feet on the floor, the palms of your hands, and your breath. And notice maybe that there's some chatter of your mind. Just let that fade into the background for this moment. Let your conscious awareness go and anchor into your own physical experience. And calling in some imagination, imagine breathing in, drinking in, drawing in, like gratitude, a straw that you could bring up through the earth and into your body. Thank you. Thank you for this place you're at. Thank you for the field that you live in, for the life around you that brings you food, that keeps the lights on, all these systems that support us. Just breathe in gratitude and let that fill yourself for a moment. And know that the effects of drawing in gratitude benefit every cell of the body. And so as we clear and open up spaces within ourselves to be more coherent inside, we build spaces to be more coherent together. And so as we enter into this very important, sometimes very disturbing, and always inviting new innovation, new opportunities, this conversation today, let's be remembering just to start from our own selves where we're at, to take our own temperature first. And so with that thought, breathing in again, a sense of gratitude, peace, awareness into your heart. Breathe out, feeling grounded where you're at and gratitude for the land you're on. Let's just bring ourselves gently and fully to this experience we're about to have together, knowing in some way, seen and unseen, there's more coherence for our efforts. And so let your eyes softly open and come back. And thank you so much. So we're going to start off with an awesome lead panel and strategies for navigating the coming energy and food crunch. And after we give our panelists a chance to share their thoughts, we'll have a discussion. About halfway in, we're going to add 3 people, 3 change makers from Oregon. After that panel, our next panel will be permaculture and biodiversity solutions to the climate impacts in both Oregon and Lahaina, Maui, which have a lot of commonalities in some ways. Then we'll go into breakout rooms. So for those of you wanting to see the agenda and the timeline, Natalie will put a link of the agenda into the chat, and you should be able to find that there. So let's get started. So I'd like to introduce the panelists very briefly. On our first panel, if you want more information, you can go to the website for today and read more about them. But strategies for navigating the coming energy and food crunch, we have Richard Heinberg, author, senior fellow of the Post-Carbon Institute. We have Maya Dutta, Assistant Director of Regenerative Projects at Biodiversity for a Livable Climate. Malcolm Shabazz Hoover, co-founder and co-director of Black Futures Farm. Phillip Bogdanoff, chair of the board for Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, among many other things I happen to know. And of course, Laughing Helen Farrell, who of you have just met. And now I'd like to turn it over to, and basically say this lead panel is the whole reason that Biodiversity for a Living Climate is partnered with Richard, Post-Carbon Institute, and many of the people here in partnership. And I'd like to pass this over to Phillip, who's going to give us some background about this panel's foundation. Phillip.
Thank you very much. Honored to be here. Thank you for my co-panelists in particular. And Richard, apologies if I am saying some of the things that you hope to say, but repetition in this case probably is a good thing. This panel in some ways is the raison d'etre, the reason we sort of partnered with Post-Carbon Institute to try to bring together the message of our energy predicament along with Bio for Climate's message about how working with nature we can powerfully restore ecosystems. So as way of background, I just wanted to highlight sort of the energy predicament we're in. US production of conventional oil peaked in 1970 and has been declining largely ever since. There was a brief bump up when we discovered oil in the North Slope in Alaska, but we've never superseded that peak in 1970. However, thanks to fracking, we've been adding new sources of oil from shale formations. It's called tight oil. And thanks to that bump up in the last 15 or 20 years, this past year was the year we had the most production ever in the US of oil. However, that trend is not likely to continue and may reverse in the near future as those resources start to decline on top of the fundamental decline of conventional oil. Globally, we're in a similar kind of predicament as well, with big unknown being the production from Saudi Arabia. We depend on oil and other fossil fuels to run our economy, including to mine the metals and minerals that were needed for technology, our cell phones, solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, electric vehicles, etc., and to upgrade the electric grid to handle the new electrical loads that we're anticipating. But perhaps more importantly, conventional agriculture is heavily dependent on fossil fuels, both as diesel inputs for powering tractors and trucks and refrigeration, but also natural gas in particular as a primary input for producing the nitrogen fertilizer that's been the biggest boost, creating the so-called green revolution that has enabled our global population to go from 1 billion to nearly 8 billion. And as these resources increase in price or decline in availability, the amount of food that conventional agriculture can grow will diminish, perhaps severely. So as we start looking to how to increase and scale local production of table crops, the food that we put on our table every day, beyond the maybe 5% of food that comes via farmers markets and CSAs. The majority of people buy their food from the big box grocery stores. As we start to look at how to do that, we learned that a considerable amount of the infrastructure that used to be here 100, 200 years ago has largely disappeared or moved to other locales, or the labor market has moved to, Southern California or Mexico. So all of this effort to recreate the aggregation distribution hubs, the cooling, the housing for the transient, the seasonal labor, et cetera, takes a fair amount of lead time, years, perhaps decades to restore. So we need to kind of start thinking about how to do that. So the focus of this panel is how can we reimagine our food systems so they can be less dependent on the fossil fuel inputs, and how do we begin to restore the local growing and the systems that support farmers to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you so much. So as we move into the next focus of this panel discussion, we're going to begin answering the question of how do we reimagine our energy and food systems so they're less dependent on the fossil fuel inputs, as well as restore local growing of table crops and the systems that support our farmers to do that. In the background, I want to ask each of our panelists and those who are asking questions to just have in the background thrumming. What evidence do we need, if we need more, that we need to pay attention to the challenges coming? It's on its way. So some of the evidence out there. Our current situation we know is largely misguided. What is not working and what is working? And then very importantly, what steps do we need to take now? So we're going to kind of follow that flow. So I'm going to open it up now to our panelists. We have about the next 50 minutes, not quite. And there's a lot to say there. So I ask each of the panelists, try to keep your input to around 10 minutes total if you can, your internal clock, and I'll gently help you if you can. And Richard, will you start us off, sir?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll just add a little detail to what Philip has already said, which is a terrific outline of the overall situation and what we're talking about here today. I'm going to talk a little about fossil fuels because we take their benefits for granted. And 85% of our current energy comes from fossil fuels. And it's energy that enables us to do literally everything we do, whether it's coming from fossil fuels directly or the food we eat. Without energy, basically nothing happens. So having these enormous sources of energy based on tens of millions of years worth of ancient sunlight that was concentrated by natural processes, again, over many millions of years, having access to these fuel deposits that we could extract over the course of just a couple of centuries and have the benefit of all those millions of years of energy has enabled us to do some pretty amazing things. And you look around in the modern world, and of course we human beings have so much to be proud of, population growth, as Philip mentioned, but also just the growth of economic activity altogether, and the origin and flourishing of whole new industries that didn't even exist maybe even 10 years ago, certainly not 100 or 200 years ago. But of course, fossil fuels have two big drawbacks. One is that they're depleting non-renewable resources, and depletion is something we actually should be paying a lot more attention to. I'll talk about that in a moment. And of course, the other one is that burning fossil fuels releases CO2 and other gases that are wrecking the global climate and imperiling not only the future of our species, but other species as well. So these are like really serious problems with fossil fuels. Okay, is depletion a problem, and why? Well, Philip mentions some important facts about U.S. oil production, and I have to underscore the fracking revolution in the last 10, 15 years in the U.S. has made a huge difference, not just for this country, but for the world as a whole. regular conventional world oil production hit a peak around 2005 and has been on a sort of undulating plateau since then. And now it's actually starting to decline. But total world oil production has continued to increase almost entirely because of U.S. tight oil from fracking. So this is a huge deal, and it's coming to its end because the problem is that it requires so much drilling, and the number of places available to drill is limited in places like Texas, North Dakota, and so on, where fracking is happening. There are only small areas where drilling is actually profitable, and those are being drilled out very, very rapidly. So over the next 5 years or so, we're going to see production from fracking decline. Meanwhile, fossil fuel production in the forms of coal and natural gas will probably be peaking out around the same time, a couple, 3-4 years either way. But we should expect world fossil fuel energy to start declining right about now. But from a climate perspective, of course, that's exactly what we would want to happen. We want to be getting less of our energy from fossil fuels because fossil fuels are wrecking the climate. But that's only not a problem if we can replace that energy rapidly and relatively easily and economically. So we're looking for much larger shares of energy from solar, wind, nuclear, hydro, geothermal to come online over the next few years and couple of decades. But that's going to be a huge, huge challenge globally. All of these sources, alternative sources of energy, produce electricity, which is great. Electricity is very useful form of energy. It's an energy carrier, not really a source of energy, but we only use energy in the form of electricity for about 20% of the stuff we do. The other 80% of energy usage is from using fuels directly, solid, liquid, and gaseous fuels. So, just a few days ago, we heard that the nation of Portugal was getting 100% of its power from renewable energy. But that's a little misleading because actually that's just talking about electrical power, right? For 3 or 4 days, Portugal was able to get 100% of its electrical power from renewables. That is great news, but it means Portugal was getting about 20% of its energy from renewables. So let's put that in perspective. So we need to electrify a lot of what we're doing, that other 80% of energy usage. That's going to be easy in some cases, like electric cars. I drive an electric car. They're great, and there are lots of things we can do with electricity. But other things are going to be very difficult. And a lot of our manufacturing infrastructure, making steel, concrete, a lot of transportation that involves shipping or heavy trucking or aviation is going to be extremely difficult to electrify. It's going to take time, and we'll need energy storage. We'll need more transmission, and that's going to require a lot of minerals, something that Phillip also mentioned: copper, nickel, lithium, sand. We're facing shortages of sand. Of course, there's a lot of sand in the world, but most of it's the wrong kind for producing cement or semiconductors, whatever. So all of these materials are going to be in short supply, and we'll be having to open all kinds of new mines or expanding existing mines, which means for indigenous people, for other species, this is going to, pollution, destruction of habitat, et cetera, et cetera. The only realistic scenario for getting out of this bind is to find ways to use a lot less energy. And this is not something that's being widely discussed. Generally speaking, from environmental organizations, as well as, economists, the mainstream press, and so on, what we're hearing is the expectation that somehow we will be able to produce so much renewable energy that we'll be able to have a smooth and organized energy transition from enormous amounts of fossil fuels to enormous amounts of renewables, and we'll all be driving electric cars and basically living exactly the same way we are now. My research of my organization, Post Carbon Institute, suggests that that's a pipe dream, that in fact, all energy transitions are transformative events. If you look at how life changed from before the fossil fuel revolution to how we live today, everything changed, and politics changed, economics changed, the way people expect to live changed. Well, we're looking at as profound a shift going into the post-fossil fuel era as we experienced going into the fossil fuel era. So what's that going to look like? We don't know exactly, but it's going to take an awful lot of not only, really hard work to make this happen in a way that produces the fewest casualties possible, but also imagination. We have to imagine what life could be like without fossil fuels, and that starts by understanding what they're currently doing for us, and then taking that apart, analyzing what can we do without them, how can we get there, and not just in our own households, but in our communities, because what we can do in our own households is largely constrained by what society as a whole is expecting, the norms that are created, the manufacturing and transportation and food systems as they exist. So we have to reimagine not just what we're doing in our own households, but we have to reimagine these big systems that we are living in part of. So I hope that's a useful framing for what we're going to be talking about from here on. Thank you.
That's a beautiful framing. Thank you so much, Richard. So again, you've outlined how much our current system is actually just misguided. They're just not paying attention to things that are about to really come at us. So opening up now to the rest of the panel, what's working, what's not working? Other evidence that we need to be paying attention to? Who would like to add in? Maya.
I'll go.
Oh, good.
Go ahead, Maya.
Thank you, Helen. Please. Yeah, please, Helen.
So I appreciate information that you shared, Richard. Thank you. And I think it's a lot of food for thought. And as an Indigenous woman who grew up in Alaska, whose father worked in oil fields and whose brother still works in oil fields, I'm acutely aware of how that has impacted our societies. And I also want to say a lot of the information, like the misinformation, that they give us the information that they want us to have in response to how they want us to respond. And I know that because my dad was a part of that system. And so this is a lot of for me, what I feel like the misguided things are that have been in cycles and circles within humanity for a long time is the belief that we can be independent as individuals and live in our household and provide for ourselves and our family through the system that's set up, and that food will be provided for us, and that if we do the right things, like get the right job and blah, 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 then we'll get the right house. And it's all basically an illusion, because the crux of what has always been true since humanity has been a part of our relations is that we all need to work together, and that each one of us brings our gifts so that we work together to sustain the whole. And so this place about that energy comes from oil, or that energy comes from coal, or these sorts of things, that we are dependent upon these things to be sustainable, because we need this energy so we can drive a car, we can, we've gotten this thing that we call progress. I think it's been wonderful to be able to just live my life the way I have to this point, but I think we're all becoming aware that it's been something that's been fed to us. It's an illusion. And so how do we come together when the cycle happens again? Because starvation has been a part of humanity since humanity has existed. It goes in, we go into civilization, we go into cycles, we go into using too many of our resources, we give our power away to leadership that is misusing their power and control and manipulation. And it's as an individual taking back our power. Power is not based on electricity or these sorts of things. That is the misconception. That is the illusion. So how do we take back our power? By reconnecting with the earth and listening to the earth about the cycles and circles and what it needs to restore itself and to set things up for what is to come. And the way that I personally feel that we can do that is by having discussions like this. And I might talk to Maya afterwards and see what it is that she's doing in the world to create a solution. And I might talk to Malcolm because I loved his thing that said feed 'em freedom. Man, that just like hit me like something like nobody's business. I love that so much. And because if you control the food, if you control the energy, if you control the blah blah blah, you control the people, right? So I want to be empowered. That's what I want. And so I feel that the crunch is based on these kinds of systems, each one of us following our passion, so that when the crunch happens and I'm like, oh, this is a piece that's missing from my community thing. So I'm going to reach out to Melanie because I know that that's something that she's working on. She's like, actually, I have somebody in Japan that just did a whole thing on this. And so the person from Japan sends it over here because we're all connected. And what this has done for us is it's created this connection, and we could utilize that piece to create the change that we need. And I'm just one opinion, but I'm ready to hear everybody else's. And thanks for letting me jump in.
You're pointing us in such an important direction. So that focusing now on solutions, what are some of the low-hanging fruit that we can take for food, for energy solutions? Let's start thinking about that, because that's ultimately the place we have to go. So thank you so much for that, Helen. I'd like to ask Malcolm if you would like to put in here, and then Maya.
Shit. There we go. Now I'm unmuted. No, I'm not. Now I'm unmuted. Thank you for loving Feed 'em Freedom, but that's actually our brother Art. That's not me. We do look a little bit alike, but Art doesn't have all this gray hair. So, and I'm older than Art, and I would argue a little more handsome. Just joking. Art is beautiful. Yeah, we have some. No, it's fine. We happens all the time. We have some. I think some practical approaches to reducing energy usage that we implement at our farm. We're an urban farm. Black Futures Farm is located in Southeast Portland. That's our URL and my name. It's blackfutures.farm. And clicking on that, or go to our website and you can read about us. And also my co-director just joined. She's in the general audience, Mirabai Collins, my co-founder and co-director. So hi, Mirabai. Hi, babe. Also my wife. We're a low-till, no-till farm. We serve mostly a local community. I just did some mapping, and we don't drive or carry our produce more than 12 miles away from where our farm is. Most of that is in 2 vehicles. We're transitioning to hybrids and EVs. And by low-till, no-till, I mean that we only have 1 machine. We don't use a plow. We don't plow our ground every year. We have 1 BCS that has 2 attachments. It's a hand power tractor for non-farm folks. It has 2 attachments. I think we've used that BCS twice. Mostly it was a glorified lawnmower. And then we got another attachment, and we haven't used that one yet because we're low-till, no-till. And so that low-till, no-till approach sequesters carbon. It also prevents the use of heavy farm equipment. And also all of the work done on our farm is done by hand. We have a staff of 5 people, and everybody can't do this, right? Like everybody doesn't have time or the effort or the will, but there are some people who can do it. And I'm a strong believer in locally sourced small urban farms. And if more people had small urban farms in their neighborhoods, they could source their produce locally. They wouldn't have to drive as much. People could grow their own food. You know, we could bargain and barter food and other things. And that overall, because I saw this happen during the pandemic, I think we all saw it happen where we were driving, the air was clear. You got out maybe and talked to your neighbors a little more. And it was great. It was really a wonderful time. Let me think. I made some notes. Oh, one thing that one of the previous people said, I think was Laughing Helen, was that knowledge sharing is really important. And I think we exist in this like vampiric, capitalistic, exploitive framework, and it's really hard to imagine how we will get outside of that. But I don't believe in capitalism at all as a construct. I think it's inherently anti-life and destructive, and always teaches you that you have to be a product and to rationalize and like make your existence for a reason. Like I'm here because I get to sell things, or this is what I have to offer. You're a human being on the planet. You have as much value as anyone else. No one else inherently is more valuable than any other human being, and we should not have to qualify or work for our right to exist and breathe and be. I just don't believe in that. I think it's really a shitty way of being in the world, and I'm really looking forward to when it finally collapses. But I fear like probably all of us will be dead and gone, and there may not be any human beings before they figure out that capitalism is anti-life. It's not just anti-human, it's anti-life. You know, some things are not meant to be quantified or assigned a value to. And under this current system, everything has a value, everything has a price. We all heard that. And it's just wrong. So I know I've been yammering for a while, but we've done some other things that I can talk about later, like we did an energy audit just recently for all the cars that are used attached to our farm, all the power usage we have. I mean, we came in pretty low. I'm excited. And I think that we are transitioning. We're the recent recipients of a Portland Clean Energy Fund grant. And so we're putting 15 solar panels on the top of our wash pack station. And that is going to be able to fully power everything we do, including an EV, for a year. So I'm excited to see what other changes we can implement and learn from. So that's it. That's my spiel. Thank you for my time.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Malcolm. Actually, you know, looking at what's misguided for sure, but also what is working and what you're up to in that lane. So thank you so much. Maya, love to hear.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts stewing, and I really appreciate my fellow panelists' contributions. You know, in particular, I think Malcolm made a great point about, you know, localizing food production is a huge kind of energy and food systems transition that is getting at one of our basic necessities in life, you know, kind of food, water, shelter, and community being the things that we really need to look to preserve as we make the transition under this kind of great crunch that we're facing. So I think that is one thing that I really want to drive home for people is, you know, what is it that we need to preserve, and therefore what we need to prioritize in terms of kind of coming energy descent. So localizing food production is one of it, and also changing the way that we do our food production. And someone kind of started mentioning some of the benefits of regenerative agriculture. You know, Malcolm's talking about low till and no till, and this is one of many strategies for kind of recentering and reintroducing biodiversity into our food production. And a lot of people kind of separate out the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis, but we can really think of them as one and the same. You know, it's the crisis of extracting from our earth, where we have ultimately finite resources and kind of finite capacity to grow in this kind of march of progress. So as we look to be a part of our ecosystems and a generative and nurturing part of our ecosystems, we can reintroduce polycultures of biodiversity using cover crops, using kind of diverse food forests and things that we have seen work for increasing the complexity of a system and letting a lot of the other living beings, kind of soil microorganisms, microbes and fungi, vegetation, letting those things do their work of ultimately what all of us on this planet are doing, which is getting energy from the sun. You know, even kind of Richard's point of all of our fossil fuels, ultimately every bit of energy on this earth comes from the sun. And if we can get better at, in real time, harnessing photosynthesis to do that kind of magic alchemical process of converting sunlight into usable biomass and into things that support living systems, we can really make a lot of wins. So I'd like to think that one of the kind of essential strategies, you know, I don't have the answers for the coming food and energy crunch, but we're here to talk about strategies, and certainly transforming our systems to be regenerative is one of them. It's a way to use a lot less energy. I think also as we start to think about restoring our kind of functioning ecosystems, we can also pay attention to the ways that they're saving us from a lot of the extremes of climate. So as we have functioning ecosystems that cycle water, that put moisture back into the air, we're also increasing the amount of kind of predictable rainfall that we get. We're increasing the resources in terms of our aquifers. We're increasing our capacity to weather these extremes. And so, you know, as we look to this transformation that's undertaken in our coming food and energy crunch, we're also looking to have better solutions to the crises that we face, because manufacturing our way out of this crisis, you know, ultimately we are still running into the same finite resources. And that's whether we are kind of continuing on with business as usual production, or if we're trying to, you know, build up our resilience in terms of like a seawall or the infrastructure that we are putting together to face some of these extreme events. As we do that, you know, we're ultimately, as long as we continue to degrade our natural ecosystems, we'll be missing part of the picture. So I think as we look into our food systems, our energy systems, into infrastructure, trying to use more natural materials, are ways to use a lot less energy. You know, natural systems can be such a huge win and such a simple way to restore our relationships that ultimately builds up our own resilience and builds up our own well-being, as well as we have that connection to the earth around us. I think the final thing I'll say about that is when we're looking at the timelines of you know, the shortages that we're facing now and the crises that we're in, when it comes to a purely kind of carbon-focused view of climate change, when we're looking at just reducing and capping off emissions and waiting for the climate to stabilize due to simply calculating greenhouse effect, it would take centuries to kind of return to habitable conditions on our planet. However, if we are able to kind of invest in regenerative ecosystem restoration solutions, that cooling capacity, that buffering capacity actually allows us to return to livable conditions on our planet in a matter of decades. And I think that's really essential here, because all of this is about managing descent, managing transition. And so we have to be really careful and intentional and thoughtful with our time and what we are investing in. So I think the ultimate way to do that is through connection, through solidarity with one another across human communities, and then also with all of these other life forms that we're connected to and kin with. So thank you all so much for kind of bringing that into this discussion.
Thank you, Maya. That was absolutely beautiful. Well said. and thinking towards innovative solutions, and the fact that we have a thermonuclear reactor shining down on us every day and what can emerge from that. I'm interested to, follow that train a little more. Phillip.
So I would just like to piggyback on what Maya said, and maybe address the questions of what's working and what's not working. What's working is nature. I mean, the billions of years of evolution that creates life, that continues to create life, is working. And to put things in perspective, a few months ago, I did a calculation based on how much energy solar, wind, fossil fuels, hydro, etc., human civilization uses, and compared that to the amount of energy flowing from the sun that nature uses. Human civilization is about 0.001 of that energy flow that nature manages: the winds, the oceans, the tides, the sediments, et cetera, the green stuff. So the issue isn't the scale of our energy use or even our consumption, but it's the choices we're making of what to do with that amplified power. And most of our choices have been to interrupt the healthy functioning of ecosystems. And that's something that we could do tomorrow. You could stop doing what interrupts nature and go out and plant. You know, get your hands in the dirt, do a garden, flower gardens, permaculture, plant trees, plant fruit and nut trees, plant berry bushes, etc. All of that helps to restore the healthy functioning in the biodiversity, provide habitat for other species that are an integral part of, the life that we are today. And just to give a name to it, Maya mentioned it, but the carbon tunnel vision of focusing only on the emissions part of this huge picture is not serving us well, and in fact is a misguided strategy that's not going to help cool the planet in the decades that we have ahead of us. But as she said, working with nature, we could actually very rapidly, you take a bare piece of ground, you plant some grass seeds on it and water it, and in a few weeks it's green. And instead of becoming a hot spot of bare ground, it's now a cool piece of grass that is helping to cool the planet. So we can amplify that all around the world.
That's beautiful. Stop doing what interrupt nature and restore healthy functioning of life with all the benefits. That's absolutely beautiful. Richard, I'm wondering if you have more you want to add to this, given how this conversation is flowered.
Sure. I just introduced the word, and we've already actually been talking about the concept, but the word multi-solving. Because what we see with fossil fuels is we have one thing, which is our dependency on these depleting non-renewable energy resources that creates multiple problems, not only climate change, but also, what do we make with fossil fuels? We make chemicals, we make artificial fertilizers, and all these things that are incredibly polluting. I mean, some of the pollutants that we're creating using fossil fuels are going to be around for centuries. And they're having horrific impacts on human reproduction of other species, toxicity at so many levels. So one thing creates all these problems. What we need to do is not just try to solve each of those problems in isolation, but time is limited, resources are limited. What we have to do is focus on the solutions that tackle more than one of these problems at the same time. And that's what tends to happen with nature-based solutions. So as has already been pointed out, when you're looking at a solution to problems in the food system that involve energy, that involve soil, that involve producing healthier food, if you're looking at nature-based solutions with as Black Futures is doing with no-till farming, with using more human labor as opposed to more machines and so on, you're actually solving a whole bunch of problems at once. And that's, that sort of seems like magic, but, it's just a shift of attitude that allows you to do that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I just put a call out if there's any other questions in the chat. We got a question from Susie O'Brien, who has to leave, but she's in the process of wanting to build a community framework for a tiny co-housing village, which we're seeing more and more. And as a single person who can't afford it and doesn't want to purchase rural land by herself and has her mom and family member intergenerational challenges, how do we proceed with that? I'm wondering if, I know Brad Smith is on here, that he's personally involved with that. Any specific things coming from our panelists about ways and frameworks to strengthen our community building in order to have more resilience for the coming times? Malcolm, I'd like to actually ask you if you would weigh in on that, and then Helen.
Yeah, I was gonna actually raise my hand. I guess it pays to say a little bit about how I got into farming. I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery from drugs and alcohol for close to 7 years. And immediately after I got out of rehab, I got a job at the Oregon Food Bank. There was a family farming next to the food bank who I used to go hang out with. And the very wonderful Art looks up one day and he says, "Hey, bro, we love you and we love talking to you, but when you come out here, we don't get no work done. And if you want to come out here and keep talking to us, Art, I see you laughing, you remember, you know, just help us." I was like, "Oh yeah, show me what to do." I was really honored that they asked. And also I think I had like butchered a collard green plant, like I had come and cut it in half or something horrible, I don't know. Anyway. So Art showed me how to weed, and like they were already my people, like I had already like loved them, but because he immediately gave me a way to be a contributor, not just be in the community, but to add to what the value of the community was, showed me like who he was as a person. But then I started healing, right? Like I started like physically getting better. Like my mind started to heal, my body started to heal. And so I wanted everybody to have that. You know, I wanted everybody to have access to this thing I have access to. And so I immediately started like working, because I've been an organizer for a long time. I immediately started working in the organizing space and like thinking about what else, how could I contribute? How could we bring people together? And so Black Futures Farm is a place where we say we grow vegetables in community, where we gather people at our farm, we have events. And sometimes we ask people to work and sometimes not. Like, you know, it's more important that you're there and you see this kind of functioning environment where we just get to love on each other and feed each other and share learning than it is that the weeds get pulled. You know, they're going to get pulled. We're going to do it. We have a wonderful, you know, crew of volunteers to come and help us to do those things. But what's more important is that Black people get a place to gather and be with other Black people, particularly in a place like Oregon, which is like 2.7% Black. And I think 80% of us live in and around Portland. And it's a very small community. And so it's really important, especially as we are also, you know, like Indigenous people, not to this land, but to another place, that we have a place to be with each other and to see each other like, hey, hi. And then to share skills, to share knowledge, all the beneficial things that happen in community happen at our farm. And so I think it's important for us to build intentional communities, no matter what communities you may belong to. It's important for you to gather with those people physically, if possible, on a regular basis, just to be in one another's company, to hear each other, what's going on, how I can be helpful to you. I may have something to ask for. It's important, you know, and it is what has helped to keep me sober and sane. I met Mirabai and fell in love with Mirabai and married Mirabai because I was at an event that Arthur and Shantae, Art's partner, started, and it has given me everything. And so I know that it's a multiplier effect. You know, the more that you build community, the more community builds, the more people that you connect, the more people connect. And so I really credit Art and Shantae for giving me this gift, but we have also tried to share that gift with as many people as possible. And so Art and Shantae could not have known when they were starting Mudbone Grown. You know, what's Art, like 12 years ago, 13 years ago? How long ago? A while ago, that they were going to be the tip of the spear for the Black, and not just Black people, but all people of color and low-income people, that they were going to be the tip of the spear of this local small gardening farming movement, but they really, really are. You know, you can't talk about this movement in Oregon without bringing in Mudbone Grown, because they do it the best. They
That's
provided
beautiful.
many examples for the rest of us. And I encourage everybody to look at all the things that they've done, you know, and that they continue to do in the community. You know, they have pantries, farms, satellite farms, education programs. I mean, they've done an incredible amount.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for bringing that into the room, and Mudbone Grown, their beautiful online presence as well. It's coming time, and Helen, I know I invited you, and we definitely want to invite you to speak, but we have 3 other people who are getting ready to join us, Claire, Ola, and Julia, and we're a few minutes behind on getting them in, so I want to give them an opportunity to come in, and then Helen, we're going to continue this conversation. Do we have them highlighted? We have, I don't want to speak until I see them. They're there. Okay, Claire. Claire, Strategic Development and Learning with the Prout Institute and the New Era Convergence, and also a friend and neighbor. Welcome, Claire. It's great to see you here. And Arthur Shavers, who Malcolm's been given a lot of love on. Glad to have you here, Arthur. He's the co-founder, Urban Farmer Community Organizer, Mudbone Grown. So we're about to hear more of that. President, Operations and Infrastructure, Project Manager, Feed 'em Freedom. Feed 'em Freedom. God, I love that. Feed 'em Freedom Foundation. That's fun to say 3 times fast. Thank you so much. And then Ola Ursin, Mayana coached me in saying that. Ola Ursin, who's co-founder of Kailash Eco Village, a retired family physician and a computer software designer. So welcome our 3 friends. I know you've been listening in as we continue our conversation about what's working, what's not working, what's happening on the ground, and now we have more of our local community leaders. So before we jump in with the rest, I want to extend to Helen just a few minutes. She had a thought that she wanted to share about our last thread, and then we're going to turn it over to Claire. Helen.
Thank you. I think I'd rather listen to our new speakers. That feels very important. I've already spoke a lot, so thank you for
Helen.
giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Claire, great to see you. Please. You're on mute.
Okay, I'm going to take a few minutes to describe a program that we're working on, the purpose of which is to educate, to give people in community opportunities to get out of their ruts, their boxes, and to reframe what we can do and what we're doing. Because we're talking here about, these natural climate disasters that are compounded by the collapse of social systems collapse. And we're all affected by it, either for the epicenter or supply chain disruptions or climate refugees. So this is not future, this is now, and at least in the past 10 years. I want to point you to 2 books, one called Disasterology, and Dr. Samantha Montaro was involved in Katrina response, and she analyzes how the systems collapsed in that disaster. And also, most of you are probably familiar with Naomi Klein's shock doctrine analysis of how neoliberalism moves in after a disaster to grab the commons. So those things, ideas really inform our work. And we're proposing a reverse shock doctrine where we can take advantage of those kind of disruptions to introduce regenerative systems. So we know now that disasters are not isolated events, that they build on histories of extraction and exploitation. We also know that FEMA, Red Cross, and other agencies don't have the capacity to respond as needed, especially to cascading polycrisis. And there's an assumption in the emergency response community that we're going to go back to normal. But what we also know is that that's not going to happen. We're not going back to normal. What really happens is that disaster capitalism moves in and privatizes. Those without resources or uninsured home ownership are displaced. Here in Oregon, several years after the Blue River fire, there's still people living in their cars, while investors are buying their properties for second homes. Looking at Lahaina, they're fighting to keep off property speculators, and corporate takeover of the water supply is a big deal. So disasters increase economic disparities. There's something else that happens with a disaster, which is that there's urgency. People's routines, our social patterns, our social systems are disrupted. People step up to solve problems. Community mutual aid is mobilized, right? So after the initial trauma, research actually shows that people minds are more open to new possibilities after these kind of disasters. And we look at that and we're thinking of that as that's a pivot point. That's an opportunity to do systems change. And we've been developing a template, we call it community-driven response and transitions. And it's an educational program that invites communities to prepare for disaster with a tabletop planning scenario. And we imagine new ways to organize society. We'll figure out how to meet basic needs like food, housing, sanitation, trauma response, well-being, governance, and economic infrastructure, the whole shebang. And we start with shared basic values. Teams walk through what is needed, short and long term, what assets are available, and how different sectors collaborate and complement each other. So participants interview subject matter experts in their area. This is very much place-based organizing, and involve community to draft plans of action. So where we're coming from, we're not going back to normal. We're transitioning to a new era, and disasters are a leverage point for doing that. And we're going to have a breakout sessions for further discussion. And also, if you're interested, this is also happening in Maine and North Carolina, and also locally in Eugene. If you're interested, send a direct message in chat with your email so that we can invite you in to do that work with us.
Thank you so much, Claire. Yeah. Being a part of the CDRT effort here in Eugene, it's been awesome to watch the organizing efforts and people in collaboration around this. It's very powerful. Ola and Arthur, I know that you're also working on resilience in communities who've been underrepresented or marginalized. Ola, would you share a little bit and then we'll pass it over to Art?
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to participate in this great conference. So people have been talking about many of the things that could be solutions, such as gardening in an urban setting and community building and reducing power use and that sort of thing. Well, we're doing that at Kailash Eco Village. We have a great model. I think an eco village is a great model to allow people to live in community and have a wonderful place to live. We live in a garden, actually. So we're surrounded by food that we're all producing. We actually produce so much that one of our community members, who is a professional farmer, sells about $5,000 worth of our produce at his weekly farmer's market. So we're a 32-unit apartment building on about a couple of acres. We also have a single family duplex and a tiny house so we have about 35 units total, 55 residents. We grow much of our own veggies, our fruits, berries, grapes. And as I mentioned, we even sell at the farmer's market. We're a community that's focused on sustainable practices like permaculture, community building, and sharing resources. So living in community allows you to have far fewer possessions because you can share what you have with everybody else. We produce on site about 2/3 of the power we use, including to run our 2 electric vehicles, which are shared to the community, and of course, electric bikes. We're also connected to public transport. So, and Southeast Portland, where we're located, is very bike friendly. So there's no need for a personal car. So how do we do it? Our living spaces are modest. Our 1-bedroom units are only about 500 square feet. The housing is clustered, which preserves most of our space for gardening. We garden organically, no herbicides or pesticides. To foster community, we do many things together, mainly gardening, but we also have social events and we dine together on occasion. We retain all our rainwater on site. We recycle gray water and even nutrients from excreta like sanitized human urine. So, and also to make living here accessible, we try and keep our rents below market rate. So to see more, to find out how we do this and what exactly we're doing, tune in to the Kailash breakout session. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ola. It's so exciting. And Arthur, we'd love to hear from you, and then we're going to take some questions from the chat.
Thank you, Melody. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Brother Malcolm, I want to just give honor to you. And I appreciate all the praise. I appreciate all the work that you do. You're definitely an icon in our community. My name is Arthur Shavers. I'm a farmer with Mudbone Grown. We're a local farm. I'm a Portland native. We really focus on trying to build accessible opportunities for beginning and small farmers within our community. Everything we grow is distributed to community through CSA and free food markets, as well as through our food pantries. We've operated a number of different educational programs for Black and BIPOC community members. Shantae and myself started this journey wanting to basically create an avenue for our children to have sustainability. And we quickly realized that outside of our own family, there was other people who wanted to be a part of this journey and wanted to learn some of these skills and live this kind of lifestyle. So it's kind of propelled the work that we do. We currently operate 2 farms in Corbett and in Troutdale. And that farming activity has spiraled off into creating a nonprofit called Feed 'em Freedom Foundation. And Feed 'em Freedom Foundation is just an extension of Mudbone Grown. And our mission is really just to make food accessible to folks who don't have the resources to have healthy grown food locally and in season. So we operate a couple of food pantries throughout the Portland Northwest area. And we're also looking at doing some educational things. It's really important for us to help to usher in the next generation of farmer and to be able to introduce them to techniques and perspectives that we think is going to be crucial and essential in our next generation in terms of resources that we have. So we are creating incubator farms, focusing on things like reduced till, no-till, hydroponics, water collection. We're really focused on building our soil. One of our activities that we're looking at this upcoming year is putting an anaerobic digester onto our farms so that we are able to take and turn food waste into reusable energy that we could use not only on the farm, but taking some of that energy and using it to power our greenhouses so that we are able to propagate and be able to have the essentials that we need to grow. We are on 20 acres in Corbett and 5 acres in Troutdale, and we grow food for approximately 150 families every year for 22 weeks. And it's really awesome that we're able to provide that food to those families free of charge to them. We're working with our local healthcare systems through basically a food prescription program. And we're able to engage with schools and volunteers and community members in that effort. Partnerships with Black Future Farms, Black Oregon Land Trust, Black Food Fund, those mechanisms are able to help us to expand things that we're doing and to create more productive conversations and to kind of create a web of different ideas that really have an impact on our community that we're focused on, which is Black and BIPOC and those beyond. I think I have a workshop coming up in about an hour, and I'll be able to kind of dive in a little bit more about what we do personally, but it's been an honor to listen to this panel, and I hope to have relationships with you all in the future, especially those of you who are in Oregon.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. So we're going to open up some questions to our community now, and looking through the chat. Charlotte commented that the elephant we need to address is that solar energy, wind power, and electrical cars use more embodied energy than they produce. So these are not a solution. And there's some questions about what are the references for that? How do we know? So this falls back in the lane of what's showing us that we have challenges coming at us. Where are the cracks in these systems that we're seeing right now? I'd like to, if I might, put that in front of Richard first. If you could answer or direct yourself towards that, and then I'm going to open it up for anyone else who feels that they want to put in on that. Richard.
Yeah, well, from a technical standpoint, solar and wind electricity generators produce more energy than is required to construct them. The research literature is very clear about that. At the same time, it's a much more complicated discussion than just looking at energy in versus energy out, because it's not just energy that's required to build solar panels and wind turbines and so on, but also exotic materials that are depleting, that require destruction of ecosystems to extract and transport and so on. So it's not a straightforward thing. When electric cars, of course, are not sources of energy, they're ways of using energy to do things, transporting us from here to there. And it takes more energy to produce an electric car than it does to produce a gasoline engine car. Now, over the lifetime of the electric car, it will use less energy than the gasoline powered car. But once again, the electric car is requiring, this upfront energy expenditure, which is also true of solar and wind generators. The energy that's invested in making them, that's all upfront energy, right? So if we're planning to do a fast energy transition, that means that we're going to have to invest an enormous amount of energy up front to produce not only solar panels and wind turbines, but all this energy using infrastructure like electric cars that requires the energy up front. And then over the course of years and decades, we get some benefit from increased efficiency or whatever. So once again, that creates this conundrum where if we want a fast energy transition where we produce, where we build as much energy production infrastructure as we currently have from fossil fuels, that's going to require a rapid expenditure of record amounts of energy. And since 85% of our energy currently comes from fossil fuels, that means that it's going to produce a carbon pulse. And this is hardly ever figured into the energy transition plans of countries and the IPCC and so on. It's just not discussed, but it's a simple physical reality. The only way to avoid that carbon pulse from the energy transition is to aim to produce a lot less energy. And that means reducing our ongoing operational energy usage for everything from transportation to manufacturing to our food system.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. It's going to be interesting because if we don't, we'll be made to. That's going to be interesting. Phillip, please.
I will piggyback on Richard. Jim Lawrenson, one of the people who helped organize this event, and I and Louise as well are a member of the Cedar Lane Ecosystem Group. And I just put a link into the chat to a letter we submitted to our state of Maryland, kind of critiquing the Climate Pathways report for their rather narrow carbon tunnel vision, focus on emissions. At the end of that letter, there are 7 or 8 kind of pointers to documents where I've been collecting information about the limits of the renewable transition. The lead one, of course, is Simon Michaud, which I think Charlotte mentioned, and I'd highly recommend taking a look at. He's got a whole range of things, and there are even a few that I have not yet added to the document, but basically calculating if we're going to get to net zero by 2050, what's the materials and metals requirement to get there, even to do the first generation build out. And we are far, far short of being able to achieve even that target. Second, I wanted to respond to Claire's kind of focus on kind of disaster response, and without necessarily judging who's working in your local emergency management agency, but in Washington, D.C., I'm part of a food resilience working group that's kind of been knocking on the doors of some of the big box stores to try to get them to come to the table to talk about how are we going to facilitate this transition to, buy and sell within those stores more local produce, and basically getting no response. But a couple of guys in DC's Emergency Management Agency put together some scenarios around how are we going to respond to, say, a hurricane or a blizzard that knocks out food delivery for a week or 2 weeks. And they were able to say to the big box stores, we want you to be part of this conversation. Initially, they also got a refusal, but then they said, well, what are you going to do when people start lining up outside your store looking for food? So you may find some allies. They have done some initial scenario planning and data gathering that's very, very useful in trying to help us paint a picture for our region. I'm in Washington, D.C., about what are the pathways, what are the vulnerabilities, and so on. So I recommend that to anybody that wants to kind of have a better understanding of your own regional food system. Start talking to your emergency management folks.
Thank you so much. I'm just putting in the chat, you really incited me to be thinking about what happened in Cuba after the embargoes. So there's some real beautiful lessons learned there. So I'm adding that. Okay, I want to do a time check right now. I know we don't have too much time yet. We are a little bit over. So I want to take this moment now, and we're going to segue to the next panel. Thank you all for this beautiful input and the rich resources and ideas that came forward. I want to introduce my colleague, Mayana. Mayana will be taking us into the next panel. Thank you, Mayana.
Thank you, Melanie. So thank you to this first group of panelists for these important insights. This is such a unique perspective that needs to be brought into the mainstream conversation. So thank you for that. So yes, let's move into our second panel discussion. We're going to talk about permaculture and biodiversity solutions to climate change in Oregon and Lahaina, Maui. So just to frame the discussion. So today we're driving into the nexus of permaculture, biodiversity, and climate resilience, spotlighting Oregon and Lahaina. So Oregon faces visible climate impacts. It's, shifting weather and stressed ecosystems pushing us to explore permaculture and biodiversity as crucial tools for adoption. So the question is, how can permaculture create resilient systems and meet the demand for local food post-conventional agriculture and its decline? So let's uncover some practical answers. So protecting Oregon's biodiversity web and restoring Lahaina's is key for ecological balance. Our panelists share insights on how biodiversity conservation boosts overall resilience. So recognizing the urgency, we are here to aspire actionable strategies. So please join us as we empower communities, policymakers, and individuals for a sustainable and resilient future. So I'm so pleased to introduce 4 panelists. Now we'll introduce a few more later. The first one is Andrew Millison. Andrew is senior instructor at the Department of Horticulture at Oregon State University. He's also the founder of OSU Permaculture Design. He's a documentary videographer, a permaculture practitioner, a host and producer on Earth Repair Radio. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
I'm also so excited to introduce Jenny Pell. She's a publisher of Growers Magazine. She's the owner of Permaculture Now. She's also a board advisor on Abundant Earth Foundation. And introducing Monica Ebataki. I hope I got that right, Monica. Monica is the founder and executive director of Beyond Organic Design. She's also a permaculture instructor at Oregon State University and Cornell University. She's the president at the Permaculture Institute of North America, PINA. And least but not least, James Laurie, who is a biologist and a futurist at Biodiversity for a Livable Climate. So in the last panel discussion, Maya and Phillip said that if we restore nature, we can reduce the climate impacts and even restore the climate. So just planting plants will start to cool the temperatures immediately. Can you expand on this? And I'll get Andrew to start. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me, and it's great to be here with all of you, and also with my good old friends Jenny and Monica here. It's great to see you. You know, one thing that permaculture is a little bit underrated for its really deep ability to do site analysis.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people think of the gardens, they think of the output of permaculture, but they don't necessarily think about the really deep, in-depth process that goes into actually creating a design, you know, with your initial data gathering and you know, looking at climate, right? Looking at wind patterns, looking at topography, looking at vegetation, looking at the way that water flows, the way that soils are distributed, right? Permaculture has this really deep process in there. And, you know, as far as the topic goes around climate change and Oregon and ways that permaculture can really help us, I would say first, I would look at the site analysis piece. And, you know, prior to 2020, we had one perspective, right? Like nobody really, I think, imagined the level of wildfire, you know, vast wildfire destruction, the destruction that we experienced here in 2020. And so, you know, in permaculture, we're using these tools, sector analysis, and we're looking at, you know, potential direction of fire based on slope, based on vegetation, based on wind patterns, and, you know, these different things. But 2020 really showed us that we actually have to zoom out and hone our site analysis skills even more. And, you know, frankly, to predict things that are almost unthinkable, right? Because, you know, suddenly, like, we're looking at all of the valleys heading from the Cascades down from the east to the west as, you know, these potential fire tunnels, right? And we're suddenly looking at these patterns on a much larger scale. And so, you know, I think I want to talk about this a little bit more than I want to talk about like how someone can necessarily increase biodiversity in their yard, because wherever your particular piece of the, you know, property grid is, you know, you're present in this larger pattern. You're present in this larger watershed pattern. But when we're looking at climate change impacts, you're present in this larger ecological pattern that, you know, whether it's fire, whether it's drought, extreme heat, because, you know, we had 2020 that really showed us this sort of new macro fire pattern that we need to be aware of. And then we had 2021, where we had temperatures that, you know, now they're saying, yeah, we weren't expecting temperatures like we had for about like another 60 years or so with our earlier projections. And now suddenly, I live in Corvallis here, just 45 minutes from here. Salem had hit 117 degrees in 2021. So, you know, it's created this situation whereas permaculture designers, we really need to suddenly evolve our ability for this site analysis. And we need to suddenly factor in this larger scale events than we previously had to. And so, you know, practically speaking, I mean, a lot of that is just understanding really how forces move in the landscape and where you are particularly situated in relation to these greater forces. And it's going to be really interesting. You know, I'd love to kind of bounce that over to Jenny, because Lahaina just saw the unthinkable event happen there as well, you know, based on this extreme wind event, you know, overlaid with with the drought and with the invasive species and all these kinds of things. So, you know, we're really entering this uncharted territory. It's very scary. And I'd like to say that permaculture has all the answers. But, you know, when you're talking about the northern migration of the Douglas fir range, where they're saying that by 2100, this is what they were saying before we've hit these more recent extremes, that by 2100, the Doug fir range would basically not even be in Oregon, that we'd be too hot and too dry to actually support Doug fir trees, which, is the dominant tree in the forest, if you don't know. And so, what does that mean? What's that transition look like? Is that fire, or do we actually get out ahead of that and practice like really wise management and forest transition? So this is when I think of this, I think of like the statewide scale of how would you actually adapt Oregon to what has shown itself to be the inevitable ecological transition we're going to. And so to some degree, I mean, the things that have to be done, yes, someone can do things on their particular property, their particular little line that they, have control over. But really the community scale response, the government scale response to look at this site analysis of where we are and what's happening, but to really zoom out and look at it on a bioregional level is where we need to be right now. So,
okay, thank you so much,
yeah,
Andrew. I would like Jenny to respond. Andrew?
Yeah, I've been taking notes throughout the whole thing, and I'm going to really drop a lot of content in a short amount of time. Thanks you guys so much for having me. I'm sitting here in my office in Maui, and while this conversation has been going on, numerous fire trucks and sirens are barreling down the street. We've had extremely high winds, and we're in a level 2 drought. We have 4 weeks of water left in my neighborhood. And we had several brush fires over the last few days. So our collective trauma and stress from what's happened in the last few months it's high. My heart is racing. I'm like, oh my God, where's the fire? It's right down the street. So I just want to preface that as a career permaculturalist who's been convinced of global warming since college. I'm 60 now, so that's 40 years of understanding this trend, this pattern. Here we are in this radical transition stage into the climate instability era, right? Let's just call it that. I have no doubt that it's going to get a whole lot worse. The real question for me is how fast and how unprepared we are personally at our family level, at our neighborhood level, at our community level, at our bioregional level. We're woefully unprepared, even though there are theoretically institutions in place that are trying to buffer some of that. It's not, it's the littlest, tiniest amount of need, of capacity compared to the gigantic and growing need, right? So the decisions we make right now as leaders in these fields, they're going to determine not just if our tribe survives, but like, do we thrive? Like, what are the decisions? What are the things we're doing right now that's going to set that pathway? I can see if we keep going down that road that we're on right now, I really don't want to go there. Like, I have zero interest in traveling down that highway to climate hell. It's like, I'm not interested in that. So what I'm working on is how do we scale jump? How do we lean on the decades of permaculture, which of course has borrowed from thousands of years of indigenous knowledge, right? How do we look at aggregating the information around the globe, for example, for the best pattern literacy for watershed restoration and how to accelerate succession within that rehydration equation through our watershed. So I'm just going to make an assumption that the 80 people on this conversation, probably a lot of you have studied permaculture. You understand, been through the design course. We need to start practicing it in a much more comprehensive way. We need to use that language. One thing humans are good at is accelerating succession. If we want to accelerate the healing of the watershed, which of course is going to provide biodiversity, it's going to stop erosion, it's going to protect the reef, it's going to potentially have food and medicine and pollinator pathways and all those stacking functions within that system, right? It's going to slow and spread and sink that, fertile, erosion prone watershed. We want to interrupt that, and we want to make that into yet again a fertile, abundant landscape. So we take the key elements within those systems, and then we put them in relative location so that they create synergy. So the vetiver that's in a check dam across the watershed, and then the, bananas in my, standing columns of water, which are also fire resilient, of course, they provide food, and they're wind resilient, like let's do it all at once. Here we have these methodologies, these proven methodologies through the Permaculture Knowledge Bank now, which is global, of how to do this. So what we really need are skills. Like we need people in the system who don't just design it, but who can implement it and who can troubleshoot it over time in a radically and rapidly changing, monthly, weekly, annually equation at this point. So a lot of people will hire me and great, I do a design, but they don't understand that the system doesn't just take care of itself after that. It requires a maintenance and a management. So let me reframe that, which is if you're going to go from an ornamental landscape, which is beautiful and maybe is endemic or maybe has pollinator things in it, but if you want that to go into a more functional horticulture, we're all experiencing these prolonged periods of drought. And then we have these massive rain events. And so we don't even have the systems in place to passively harvest all that water, right? So we need the skill sets. We need to teach people these deeper lineages of these skill sets so that they can troubleshoot within these systems. So that's the skill, embedding those skills in our communities are key. And then we want to be able to, specialize. We want to be generalists. We want to know a lot about a lot of things. And then we want to have 3 or 4 or 5 things that we're really good at. Now, humans love to specialize. So that's my challenge. It's like, what repository of knowledge are you going to embody at this moment? Because your community needs you. I have no faith that the government is going to take leadership on this. I mean, every single Republican candidate is a climate denier. So screw that. Like, we can't wait around for them. So, here's a funny example. In the Beacon Food Forest, which was a Seattle project that I work with my students, the question from the multi-stakeholders was, well, what if they eat it all? And I'm like, oh my God, that's your worry, that they're going to eat everything we grow? I'm like, then obviously we need more food forests in the city. And, it was very interesting to see that, challenging the multi-stakeholder community, the Seattle City Parks, the utilities, the police department, all of these different groups, into what it looks like to take our parks, which are stuck in a legacy of the Olmsted brothers, like they want to have a certain park-like sensibility, but those community centers and those parks could be edible playgrounds, and they could be catching water off the roofs. They could be, shining examples of community resilience that everybody looks at every day. I'd like to see salaried neighborhood permaculturalists. So this is a solution that I've been chewing on for years. So let's just say in your own neighborhood, what if 100 of you each put in $200 a month? You could hire somebody to do permaculture in your neighborhood. You'd have like a little personal CSA that's a fractal of the solution. Every time I don't have to go to the grocery store, I'm saving fossil fuel. Every time I eat local, healthy organic food, I'm healthier. Every time I hang out with my neighbors, I reduce the crime rate in my neighborhood. Let's look at all of the, cascading benefits that come just from salarying people right in our neighborhoods. We don't have time to volunteer anymore. If you have financial bandwidth, you should be supporting existing projects. You don't need to start new stuff. Find out what's going on in and around your community and give them $5,000 so they can salary somebody so that they can be more successful. They already have a business. They already have a framework. They already have leadership. They already have ongoing projects. So this is the kind of stuff when I look at the permaculture point of view of how do we accelerate succession, stack functions, build skills, we need to be putting in experimental crops. It's going to get hotter and drier. What's going to grow here in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? So I encourage my clients to put in 10% in endemics and 10% in something anticipating climate change. We need living banks of valuable genetic material, right? We need to have these living nurseries of solutions. Like we need to all learn how to do that. So I'm stepping into new shoes. I'm the publisher of growersmagazine.com. We're a hybrid business model. I was listening to the previous panelists talk about sort of, I'm not a capitalist. Like, I don't believe in that. It's clearly the wrong way to live on this planet. And one of my friends put a post on Facebook. They're like, can the mothers please take over now? It's like it's really time for us to shake it up. And so one of our themes, you know, at Growers Magazine is we talk about the vigil aunties. It's like, make way for aunties. It's like it's time for the mature female leadership to step into these shoes in a really strident way. It's like we don't have the bandwidth anymore for these destructive practices that are generally being perpetrated by the white male capitalist society. Okay, that's off the table now. I can move on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
we're
Jenny.
going to be working on a whole variety of educational programming, very much akin to what Andrew does. But we are looking at, I want to start a paid apprenticeship program so that the first 2 months is $15 an hour, the second 2 months is $20 an hour, the third 2 months is $25 an hour, and at the end of that 6-month apprenticeship, you're launching out and you can do it by yourself, right? You can run your own permaculture type business. So how about this for an idea, for a permaculture idea? Every time there's a holiday, here's a bunch coming up, give people a tree or a raspberry bush or butterflies, or go plant it in their backyard with them. Right? So every time someone's born, every time someone dies, and every time someone has a birthday, maybe it's B-Earth Day, we can be actually giving gifts that support the future that we want to see, like participate in it in a way that makes sense, right? So
thank you, Jenny. I'm going to stop you here and I thank you for all your calls to action. That's amazing. I love that. So I'm going to give to Jim. Yes.
Yeah. Super wrap up. I just want to say thank you for being here, and I really want to see people just get into the nitty gritty of your daily acts that make a difference at this point.
Perfect. So Jim and then Monica.
Oh, well, I'm Jim Laurie. I was trying to think of. I'm a biologist, but I'm also a futurist. I worked in the chemical industry for a while. I was in Hawaii for my Army time, which is kind of mostly on Oahu, but on the Big Island too. I wanted to show some of my friends. So I've got a slideshow. Let me find the share.
I think you are a co-host, so you should be able to.
Yeah, it looks like this. So here you go. I'm going to show some.
Yes,
I'm one of the founders of Biodiversity for Livable Climate, and I wanted to tell the story from the other species perspective, which sometimes we forget. And you notice here this picture, you've got fungi and tree communicating with each other. We're starting to learn that those kind of things happen. And we didn't know this when we started 10 years ago. This was very controversial, but Suzanne Samard and others have been helping us figure this out. And I want to make this statement. Biodiversity loss is not just the result of climate change. It's a primary driver of climate change. Climate change is a symptom of loss of biodiversity. The only solutions that prioritize the web of life will create a truly livable climate. So I think that's one thing that we often, in our day-to-day, we don't think about a lot, but so I want to say, I want to honor Oregon for passing the Beaver Believer Bill, and the governor just signed it recently. And there's a meeting, Srishti Kamal is giving a talk. I'm showing these slides pretty quickly, but they'll be on the recording. So if you want to find more information, you can get into that. November 28th, she's going to speak about what's going on. Let's see, Western Environmental Law Center. Beaver dig deep pools, keeping freshwater streams cool for the fish. They also rehydrate forests. So Oregon, might have 5% of the beaver that it had at one time. I imagine Oregon at one time had 5 million beaver. There were probably 300 million beaver on the continent. So now there's about 15 million. So So think about that, and that's an awful lot of hydration for whatever projects you're trying to do. And then there's another thing that Louise really helped me with this, the Alaka Alliance. We talked to Chanel Hassan, who's got this dream of kelp forests on the Oregon coast again. And it turns out that sea otters once were on the Oregon coast, but they were trapped out so relentlessly. So there's a few in California, and there's many in Alaska, but there's very little in between. What if they came back? And why is this so important to kelp forests? Well, a few years ago, the oceans were so warm that starfish were having a really hard time, and the sea urchins went crazy. And so if otters came back and maybe the starfish come back too, we could start bringing the sea urchins back into control. Alaka Alliance is a mix of tribal conservation community groups here in Oregon, determined to bring sea otters and kelp forests back. Now imagine this picture of the coast of Oregon. I've walked along the southern coast of Oregon and walked for miles and miles with a friend. The only one that came to greet us was a golden retriever who went many miles with us. And then Suzanne Simard, this book is her autobiography, and she's got an amazing story, and I encourage everybody to spend a lot of time with it. But I think the thing that she tried to prove for the forestry industry, that monocultures were possible. And everything she found was to something very different. She found the importance of alders and birch in our forests here. And the idea that trees communicate with each other. That's a huge, and largely through fungal networks. Healthy trees often share nutrients with younger trees. So this is the idea of the mother tree hypothesis. And as Andrew said, Douglas fir habitat is moving north. Suzanne Simard is working up with tribes up along the coast of Canada and taking students up into the Yukon and saying, can we grow Douglas firs in the Yukon? But now will Oregon accept trees from the south? The redwoods are having a hard time in California. There are people that are trying to figure out, can we bring redwoods to Oregon? And there are a few, but is that going to be the future? And could we have enough beaver in the state to rehydrate those forests? And then the other thing I think about is the Elwha River up in Washington a few years ago. They took down 2 dams along with Indigenous people helping. And they didn't know how long it would take for the salmon to recover in those streams. But within 3 years, they had a lot of salmon moving up those streams and checking them out. And of course, salmon on the West Coast die when they spawn. They're a nutrient pump, phosphorus and nitrogen to get into the woods. Our eastern salmon here in New England don't die when they spawn. That's something that has to do with Pacific salmon. The streams run much faster there. And then we've got dam removal in the Snake River. When is the dam removal? Is dam removal a good idea? Anyway, the Klamath, I was really excited to hear the Klamath, they're starting to take the dams down in the Klamath, and so salmon could move upstream again. Now, there's another thing going on, though, is we've got land is drying out in many, many places. And it turns out that grasslands and grazing animals, as Alan Savory has been telling us for 50 years, grasslands and grazing animals co-evolved. And we used to have grasslands in so many places that the earth got so cool that humans evolved in ice ages. So think about that. But I don't know if we want to go back to an ice age, but it would really be good to have a way to cool. And that's all that photosynthesis happens in grasslands. And you see the pronghorn range, there used to be so many pronghorn in the West. The Lewis and Clark thought there were more pronghorn than there were buffalo. And there were a lot of buffalo. So I thought, well, that might be one of our keystone species to rehydrate the West. And of course, what you need is an infiltration team. Here's South Dakota prairie dog hole. And these guys, imagine if you're a flood and you've got a prairie dog hole every 50 feet or so. It's going to be pretty hard. You know, you have a big rainfall, but a lot of that water goes right into the ground. It's very hard to become a flash flood. There used to be 400 million prairie dogs that was an estimate made years, you know, a century ago in a prairie dog town in Texas, size of Ireland. So that's an awful lot of infiltration going on. 15,000 dogs per square mile. And so this is the beginning of your ecosystem. And I'm really happy that Oregon is finally acknowledging rodents in terms of beaver. But when are we going to start acknowledging the prairie dogs? And you know, we want to rehydrate. Half of Oregon is pretty brittle environments, pretty dry climates, and a lot of people, there's not a lot of people living out there. So how do we recover that? This is actually a beaver dam in Nevada, the driest state in the country. And there's not much wood to work with, but there was enough water in these streams because the ranchers were starting to move their herds in a certain way. And these beaver came up, they don't know where they came from in the driest state in the country. And they started using mud. That's what they started with. Now there'll be cottonwoods and everything else coming in here now. This has been about a decade since this happened. So these streams are getting wetter and wetter. So I'll just kind of come back. So if you're curious about those slides, there's a lot of information on those slides and you can pull those out. How do we restore our streams? How do we restore our coastline? And how do we bring the nutrients to the forests? You know, we need more salmon, you know, more fungi, all of that. And the interesting thing is when I started looking at this 20 or 30 years ago, we didn't know a lot of this stuff. We've got some great researchers and so forth. I appreciate Andrew's drawings that he makes. He made some drawings about living machines. I used to work with John Todd years ago, and we built living machines in the chemical industry. And we found out that nature could, you know, if you learn about the microbes, you can clean water. If you have a lot of beaver wetlands, the water will get cleaner and cleaner. So that's the kind of things I think about. And I think there's huge potential if we include all our other species friends.
Thank you so much, Jim. That was amazing. Melanie and I can tell you beaver stories too.
Great.
So Monica, we'd love to hear from you, and then we have some questions as well before we bring in the other panelists. Monica, you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. This is wonderful. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. Wow, Jim, that was really fantastic. Thank you. Jenny, those ideas, community permacultures, are you kidding me? I love that. That's amazing. Andrew, it's always good to hear your thoughts. You really broke that down so well. I feel like the piece that I'm holding in this is that the practical solutions are there. And one of the things that I tell my children and youth that I work with, because I teach permaculture K through 12 and also at the universities, is that design is problem solving. And one of the ways to support these practical solutions is by raising awareness through education. And it can be community education, whether it's like neighborhood, or it can be public education in the public schools. But one of the things that I've seen, and what was my experience that brought me to permaculture, for those of you who don't know, I live in New York City. My organization is called Beyond Organic Design. We mostly focus on teaching in public schools and community centers. My mission is to bring permaculture to places where it's usually not, and make it accessible. So, but one of the things that I've noticed is that with a lot of people are seeing the effects of climate chaos and feeling very hopeless and having a lot of anxiety about it. And in order to be able to function, we need to have hope. So let's have some hope, y'all. Let's create some faith. Hope and faith is going to move us forward, because in order to get to these solutions, we need to know that they even exist. One of the beautiful things for me about permaculture and what it did for me and what I see it doing for my students is it helped to make things relevant to me. I'm a big problem solver. I naturally go into I get obsessed with problems. I'm like, I gotta figure this out. I gotta figure this out. And I think that children are natural problem solvers. And if we're talking about what the climate reality is going to be in 10 years, then the 6-year-olds that I'm working with in Spanish Harlem are going to be 16. And they're going to need to know what it is that they're inheriting, right? And what's great about the permaculture design lens and then the toolbox of solutions is that in the bigger picture, if we can raise awareness, like I was saying, and educate, then we have more conscious eco-citizens and people who can support all of these great ideas and understand what it even means. Like, I didn't know anything about beavers until I was trying to understand what was happening in the forest. And then when I found out that beavers were cute, I really didn't understand. Like, I live in New York City, y'all. Like, I've lived in big cities. I've also lived in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, but that's another story. But what I will say about being here is that a lot of things didn't really seem relevant to my day-to-day existence. And permaculture, when we're looking at like the bigger picture, it brings in all of these solutions. And I think that's super, super important. And in order, like I said, in order to be able to support all of these great ideas, we have to raise that awareness. So, check.
Thank you so much, Monica. So let's just ask a question, and maybe Andrew, you want to try to take a stab at this? So what are the obstacles to scaling the amount of land that we need to have impact under permaculture? And what can we do to remove those barriers?
Yeah, I often say that the fundamental flaw of human civilization, or Western civilization, is superimposing superimposing the grid of property ownership over a non-gridded landscape. So, we are talking about the boxes and squares of property ownership and weaving those, creating this mosaic that starts to resemble back into the watersheds. I mean, the watershed scale is the scale we need to be working at, really. So actually, I had this question just yesterday, and the places in the world where the political boundaries correspond with watershed boundaries are much better off, right? And so we are at least in the United States, are sort of starting in a disadvantage because your neighbor, can do whatever they want on their property. Ecologically, it might be very destructive to your property, but the fact that they're uphill from you and you're downstream from them does not really necessarily, is not recognized. So I would say the first thing is just an awareness of where you are in the watershed, just to even understand how your particular rectangular square fits in with this with the natural hydrologic units, the actual divisions of landscape. So I think that's a great first step. And then, can you weave together land within a watershed basin? Because that's the unit that the healing happens on. So, that's I can't remember exactly what the question was right now. It was about like, how do we get to the level that we need to? Was that kind of what it was? Yeah. So I would say, look at the watershed and see, can you actually create some, fragmented, can you take the fragments and create some continuity at the watershed scale? And then that's where we start, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Perfect. Anybody else want to jump in? Yeah, Jim, and then Jenny.
Every drop of water that hits the ground should go into the ground and not run off. So we need a nature's infiltration team to do that. That's big holes, that's small holes, that's perennial plants, it's mycorrhizae, it's It's, that kind of thinking. So every drop of water goes into the ground, doesn't run off. That's a goal. And the second is every photon, every ray of light that hits, it doesn't hit bare ground. We don't have bare ground. It hits something green first. It does photosynthesis. We used to have enough, there's probably 12 billion acres of bare ground out there. 5 billion hectares. There's plenty to work with. This land used to be covered in most of it. Desertification is a human project. So that we could be a symbiotic team and recover that ground. And let's make bare ground illegal. You call 911 when you see bare ground, you call 911 and say this is evil. So just a couple thoughts.
Thank you,
Jenny.
Jim. Jenny? You're on mute.
I think in the question of how do you get to scale, like we have to look at what is scale jumping, like to get from 0 to 5% capacity when you're at 0. It's hard. It's hard to get to 5% growing your own food in your neighborhood. It's hard to get to 5% in and around the city that you live in provides 5% of its own food. And again, that's a lot. It's a lot of infrastructure we don't have. And so once you get to 5%, it's actually not that hard to get to 20. And so that's that skill building capacity, embedding those skills into the community. And then Andrew's right. It's like the fractal, the mosaic, like understanding how to steward or care for or troubleshoot your own fractal, your own piece of the mosaic, so that it's part of a more resilient whole. That's the pattern literacy we need to be training people to do. And so in looking at that same sort of infiltration, metaphor of like we're trying to rehydrate our watershed, for example, and we're going to slow it and spread it and sink it, right? So that infiltration can happen and that we're going to rehydrate, we're going to rebuild those watersheds, for example. We also need to infiltrate at the organizational level. Like we need to, help to get these permaculture graduates and people who have this core set of skills into the forestry department and into the, these larger scale projects, like maritime permaculture, or just beaver habitat, like all of these things. Like we need to be able to have a voice at the bigger table where these decisions are being made. And so the scaling of it needs to happen all across the board all at once. That's one way that I look at it. It's like, what's my part? What's my community doing? And who's making decisions that's going to negate all those efforts or support all those efforts? Those are the challenges that are ahead. So scale jumping, that's my contribution there.
Great, thank you. Anything else anybody want to add? Otherwise, I have another question. Okay, so in addition to the rainy Northwest, where else in the world do we need to prioritize and support for permaculture? Anybody want to jump in?
I would say that, in permaculture, we say utilize the edge and value the marginal. So, that would attract us to some of the more marginal places in the world where we have big populations living in places that really are, on the edge of livability, with increasing heat, with land degradation, water, because if you don't take care of the places that are marginal, then those people, what's already happening is people migrate, people leave. It creates you have a whole cascade of problems when land degradation at its worst is allowed to continue. So, we see a lot of people, permaculture is called, I've heard it called the largest international aid organization on the planet, but like on a mycelial level, not a top-down level. And so, we see, I just spent some time in sub-Saharan Africa with, the Great Green Wall of Africa projects in Senegal and such. And, I felt like it was the front lines of not only the climate issue and the food security issue, but it also felt like the front lines of the migration issue in Europe. You know, like there had just been a boat that had sunk like a week before we came, and you know, hundreds of migrants drowned and everything like that. So you know, it was very stark. So yeah, so I would say the marginal landscapes, and then the most like I actually asked that question when I tried Chat GPT for the first time. I was like, okay, let's talk, let's see. And my question was, where are the most ecologically important places on the planet that are performing some functions? I mean, so we have places like the Amazon, that's like the lungs of the planet. We have places like the Siberian forests, right, that are like, you know, creating this incredible amount of respiration. I mean, so we can look and see, we can see that some parts of the world perform a very specific ecological function on this large system. You know, and then there's the answer, which is everywhere, right? Like anywhere that you can actually improve the landscape's capacity to increase life, anywhere you can increase the life force, you can increase soil, you know, increase soils and its ability to hydrate the landscape and be a sponge and grow biodiverse ecosystems is important.
Right, and I would also add that while the Amazon is often referred to as the lungs of the planet, right where you are is the lungs of where you are. And so reestablishing your own small water cycle through this pattern literacy, that permaculture is one template for that, right? So we are, you know, improving those templates all the time based on ethics and principles. And that's sort of the core, you know, feature of permaculture. And what do you do? Support people and projects you really believe in. Like this was a Paul Hawken quote from years ago. People will come up and say, hey, I've been saving for a rainy day. What should I do with some of my money? And Paul Hawken's answer was, these are the rainy days. Pick your people and projects and invest in them and support them over a period of time so that they can be successful. And it's really, I don't want to mince words on that. I think it's pretty like what we used to, you know, Toby Hemingway used to talk about. We have this little grace period. Are we at the top of this, like, you know, pulse? And, you know, we're looking back at the energy ascent culture and going, oh, that was intense. Now we're looking down the other side of the energy descent culture and we're going, oh my, oh, shit, hold on. And that window of time, that grace period to make changes, it feels more like an aperture now. Like, it's like, how do we infuse with hope and the spirit of can and the examples of success? How do we, in this like moment that we're in right now, what are we doing to make a difference that's enduring? And so that's, you know, so support people and projects that you believe in. And this is a time to open your heart, open your soul, open your wallet, and throw money at people who are making a difference.
Perfect. Any other last minute comments before we open up questions? Jim?
Well, one of the things I didn't bring up on those grasslands, the idea that grasslands co-evolved with grazing animals, why was that so necessary for these grasslands to survive? And that was because those ruminants, you know, those herds of ruminants, and this is why we need to get the animals out of the feedlots and out on the land. But ruminants make an awful lot of poop, make an awful lot of dung. They provide the nutrition for the grasslands to do well. And that's something that most places don't even remember anymore because we've used so many antibiotics and so forth. But that's, you know, Alan Savory, again, you know, the idea that a lot of the warming is because sunlight hits bare ground and that's killing us. And so we need, and of course, the idea that when you get a lot of dung and urine out on the ground, that's supposed to infiltrate in. That's where there used to be dung beetles living all over the world, but they're just not there anymore in most places. But you can have some if you plan for it. And all over the world, the dung beetles are starving. So we've got to find a way to bring them back, because on those bare ground areas that don't get much rainfall except for tiny parts of the year, You know, they need that animal nutrition. And that we've seen that happen over and over again in Texas and in Africa and so forth. So just one more thought.
And I just want to add a thought too before we go to the next question, which is this, that in elevating the solutions, we give people something to vote for, right? I think we get a lot of bad news, the media, a lot of bad news. And permaculture is very positive and it's about solutions. And for me, what I've seen is that when we talk about what's possible, people can get behind it. So that's why conversations like this are really important, which is why all the work that all of us do individually is important. And I just can't stress enough I hope everyone that leaves this call today goes out and talks the good news about the solutions that we do have to be able to counter what we're constantly being told. Check.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica. So just to make sure we don't run over, I'm going to actually thank all the panelists so much for your time. We're now going to bring in John Schull from Eco Restoration Alliance, and then we're going to bring in 3 more of our Oregon community leaders into this panel discussion. And so, John, whoops, my notes disappeared. You are the director of, and I'll let you take over.
I can do
Thank
that.
you, John.
I began as a child. I'm John Schull, co-founder of the Eco Restoration Alliance, along with Biodiversity for Livable Climate. I'm happy to see a number of people I know, and for those I don't know, you have all qualified as people I would really like to know and would welcome you to inquire about the Eco Restoration Alliance. Louise asked me to take up 5 minutes, and I've already used 30 seconds, so I'm now going to share my screen and say that relevant to the conversation I was lucky enough to hear, and I hope to see the recording of this whole event, I agree. We need to figure out how to mobilize almost everyone, almost everywhere, to consider the piece of ground that they have access to and to use some of the techniques that we've been talking about today. This is the big map to save the future. I encourage you to visit it. Each of these pins covering this planet, your planet and my planet, represents some kind of an ecosystem restoration success story. And I have zoomed in on a number in Oregon just to show you 2 things. One is there are a number of ecosystem restoration success stories in Oregon, and that we need a lot more, and you all know a lot about them. And so I want to encourage you to visit this website and nominate new entries. If you click on this button, up will come. If you click on this button, you'll find yourself at the Eco Restoration Alliance. If you click on this button, you will be given the opportunity to put your pins on this map in order to celebrate the good work that's being done that you know about, in order to inspire people that you know to do more along these lines, and to celebrate and encourage people all over the world to take some piece of dirt or water to stand up for what they stand on, to restore a piece of land or water, and to put it on the map to motivate others to do what can and must be done to save the future. So I heard you say that Big Map to Save the Future is not working for you, which is important news to me. Let me try pasting the link in again. I will test that link. This one works. I must have left a letter out of the other link. In any case, if you go to ecorestorationalliance.org, you will find out more about our organization. You'll find a link to the Big Map to Save the Future. And let me just say again, before my 5 minutes expire, you are all doing the critical work. And you all know, and I know some of you, collectively, hundreds, if not thousands of places that should be on the map in order to demonstrate to people all over the world that this is being done, that it can be done, and that we gotta do it while we still have the chance. I hope you'll follow up with me, visit the website, visit the map. If I have 30 seconds left, I'm open for questions. Otherwise, I'll see you elsewhere.
Great. Thank you so much, John. That big map is absolutely awesome. Monica was asking for hope. Well, this map brings us hope. And we need to bring all the projects that are going on. And I know some that are not on there. So yes, we will get on the map and we'll make sure that we pin them all, because this map brings hope. And it's what, working with all you guys all day long, that's what brings me hope. And I keep telling my kids, so many people are working on this stuff. It's amazing. And they just never hear about it, right? It's mycelium that's growing. And I keep telling them that mycelium is growing in all areas, not just regenerative agriculture or regenerative, but, economies, et cetera, et cetera. And one day the conditions will be right and all these mushrooms will pop up and everybody will say, where do you all come from? So anyways, thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Let me say, every one of those items on the big map includes social media links and a direct link to your own net entry, which means if you put it on the map, you have a calling card that you can use to encourage other people to take a look at it, be motivated, inspired, and have a way of spreading the good word. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, John. That's amazing. So I'd like to bring in 3 more of our Oregon community leaders into this panel discussion. So the Oregon leaders will also each be taking in and be part of the upcoming breakout sessions. So first I'd like to invite in Artemio Paz. Artemio is an architect, FSC forester. He's a farmer. He's Blue Hill certified organic farm. He's a former chairman of Oregon State Board of Education. Welcome, Artemio.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to introduce also Jennifer Acella, Ecosystems and Community Project Manager, Beyond Toxics. And also, finally, Julia Eden, who is a regenerative landscape designer and educator and lead consultant at Squatchberry, and she's a freelance writer. Thank you so much, Julia. So, Artemio, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you very much for putting this conference and this event on. I've been really humbled by all of the detailed information, the level of specificity, and the recognition of the importance of relationships to Earth. And as an educator and as an architect, I hear a lot about science. I don't hear a lot about ecological intelligence or ecological literacy. In sharing a little bit of my story, I was invited to participate in today's event because of my effort to eliminate the use of 2,4-D, glyphosate, transline, and oust on a piece of property that was contiguous adjacent to my 40 acres. That occurred in 2010. And over the course of 8 months, I rallied my neighbors and local environmental attorneys and other folks wanting to protect the watershed, fisheries, households, potable water systems, and the general health of our neighbors, which included 22 people that signed a no harm agreement that was sent to the timber industry owners proposing to use the chemicals in our natural environment. And over the course of 8 months, I was able to convince the timber industry owner that there had to be other ways to deal with invasives, quote unquote. And I relied on the Eugene Youth Corps to provide a method that would eliminate invasives on 40 acres that was less expensive than the traditional industry use of chemicals. And the industry owners then indicated that they would defer after I had called them and I requested their chemical money, and I would save them money by using the youth corps that could locally transact the removal of invasives without any use of chemicals. Ultimately, we engaged the Oregon Forest Practice Act, which, if you examine, is probably the least protective of healthy environments of all of the Northwest states. California, Washington, Idaho, all of them have more protective regulations than the Oregon Forest Practice Act. Also, the engagement had me deal with a number of my my residents up and down the Lower Mackenzie watershed, some of which were calling me to inform me that they never hunt on those timber industry properties because the animals that they shoot and hunt are always cancerous. And I also spoke to a local attorney who indicated to me, an environmental attorney, that I did not want to get into court with these people because they have deep pockets and they can crush an individual. And I was the individual championing an option, a different use of land management to protect and preserve regenerative processes on that land. And that attorney informed me that the way you communicate with these people is you share the dilemma publicly. You make the issues transparent to your neighbors, to your colleagues, to the people that protect the watershed, the municipalities, fish protectors, fisheries, fish and wildlife, all those people.
Sorry, Artemio, I'm gonna cut you a bit short because we are running out of time and I want to make sure
that's
the others
fine.
get to
I've
speak.
got
But
other details and I appreciate
that's
the
an
time.
amazing story, very powerful. I'd actually like to connect with you after because I've got a few questions
All right.
that I'm sure you can help me with.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Isela, sorry, Jennifer Isela, would you like to comment or join Artemia's
Sure.
conversation?
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Isla. I am the Regenerative Ecosystems and Communities Project Manager at Beyond Toxics. We are an environmental justice advocacy organization statewide. We work with a lot of environmental justice underserved communities throughout the state. I do know Artemio. Artemio actually invited me to be here to talk a little bit about the work that our organization does. We do work on a lot of policy issues and supporting communities that are affected by aerial herbicides. We also do a lot of work about pesticides reduction in public spaces and toxics reduction in public spaces. We have, I do live in Lane County. Okay, sorry, I was just oh, thank you. There's something in the chat. If you live in Lane County, help get signatures for an initiative petition for a Lane County watershed bill. And this is, that's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that, but thank you, Claire, for sharing that. Where was I? Oh, generally we work with local governments to help shape policy for pesticides reduction, not necessarily aerial. We're kind of obligated to a moratorium on trying to bring back legislation to stop aerial spraying. At the moment, there was an agreement reached several years ago that expires in 2025, so our organization can't participate in the aerial spraying, like stopping the aerial spraying until after 2025 due to a cooling off agreement between several advocacy organizations and the forest industry. I'll stop right there for now till we go to the breakout sessions. Did anybody have any questions?
Well, let's wait with that. I'd just like to hand the mic over to Julia, and then we can ask questions in the breakouts because we are running out of time. Julia, please.
Yeah, and I can keep it pretty quick. I have been working with native plants for about a decade now. I spent many years working with my plant mentor, Beth Blumel of Echo Valley Native Nursery. For those of you in Oregon, she's in Sandy, Oregon. Highly recommended. Great nursery, entirely natives and species, not cultivars. But anyway, but working with natives, there was a gap. There was something missing, and I couldn't identify what it was. And then I began learning about regenerative techniques and bringing in things like silvopasture and syntropic, agroforestry and permaculture and all of these sort of elements. And that really expanded my awareness and my understanding of the system. And it was around the time that I was introducing those concepts that I had to evacuate for the first time. It was a pretty big one. We were off our property for 5 days. So it was very intense. And that was the 2020 Estacada fire here in sort of just southeast of Portland, Oregon. And so that really shaped my perspective and where I'm coming from now. And one of the great things about being a landscape consultant and the coming from the perspective of trying to prevent wildfires is the way you prevent wildfire is create a healthy landscape. So, and ultimately it comes down to wet things don't burn, and a healthy landscape is incredibly wet. Soil can saturate up to 90%. Trees are basically giant fire hydrants. They can expel massive amounts of water vapor in the face of infernos that firefighters can't get close to. And so a lot of my work focuses now on water restoration in conjunction with the whole system, the soil and the plants and all of that. And it's really the first place when I'm exploring a landscape, it's really the first concept. It's the primary one that I sort of keep in mind off the bat, because all of these things work together. If you affect one part of the system, you're going to see results in the rest of the system. And water is the slowest to adapt. If you get the water restoration in place, the plants, the soil microbiology, all of that will come together. But you really, really need to have the fundamentals of the water in place, because everything needs water to survive. So yeah, that's mostly my focus now, plants and water.
Great. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to move to breakout rooms. This session is flying by. I'm a little bit overwhelmed that it's already the time for that. I have been trying to check there are no really quick questions in the chat. So I think we'll just move on. And so I'd like to thank Artemio and Julia and Jennifer for your valuable input, and that was very helpful. And then I would like to introduce Natalie. So Natalie is going to introduce the breakout sessions and move us to the next phase. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to be moving into the breakout rooms pretty quickly. Room 1 is disasters as a pivot to new systems, community-driven recovery and transition. Room 2, propagating community through food. Room 3, how to launch an eco-village in your community. Room 4, cultivating community empowerment, dismantling corporate control and amplifying people power. Room 5, permaculture and biodiversity solutions to climate impacts in Oregon and Lahaina, Maui. Room 6, permaculture design in public schools, birthing the next generation of systems thinkers and problem solvers. And don't worry if you don't remember all that, it's on the screen.
Welcome back, everybody.
Thank you. That was awesome.
That was fun. It was too short, but it's always like that.
Oh my gosh. It always feels short. Well, I know we're coming to our next phase now. We're starting to bring things to a sweet close. And I wanted to take this moment to put out into the field gratitude and acknowledgement for Louise Mitchell. Louise, in her position as Outreach Programs Manager for Biodiversity for Livable Climate, has taken on the Herculean task of helping to manage and steer this. Has been such a big energy. Louise, are you here?
I am. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Louise, thank you so much. I mean, for those of us who've been in the background, know that you had your arms around an awful lot going on, and it was a pleasure to be able to come in and work with you. I know Mariana and I were really blessed, and I want to turn it over to you, but I also want to just really put out, Louise, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very kind. Well, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you some things that Bio for Climate's up to. And I want to thank, as much as I can, the people that were all a part of this. We are so grateful. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty. So we're just going to have to, accommodate. So here we go. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So I want to show you and share with you the many things that we're up to. But before I do, here we go. I want to acknowledge our partner, Post Carbon Institute, who's been with us for this entire series. This series is 6 events. This is our 5th event, and we are about to host our 6th event in Toronto, Canada next spring. And Post Carbon Institute has been with us the entire time, and Richard Heinberg has been speaking with us for the entire series. So we really appreciate their partnership and their work with us, and of course Richard's partnership and incredible wisdom and expertise on this in this field. I want to thank our local hosts. Claire Strawn from Prout Institute has been talking with us for months about this event, and we've been grappling and brainstorming on on various ways we could go about it, kind of thinking of how we could be edgier, because Oregon is obviously very progressive. And so I want to thank Claire and Alberta and the Proud Institute. And then, of course, the Pivot Earth, which those are our moderators, Melanie and Mariana. We are so appreciative. You are both masters at this, and we are so grateful to have you both here and participating and helping steer this event along. Thank you so much. I want to thank our sponsors and Transition US, Neighborhood Villaging, Mini Forest LA, Cedar Lane Ecosystems Study Group, Cottingham Farm, Squatchberry, and Rewild Organics and Edward Jones Organics. And we actually received a donation of a couple of turmeric products from Rewild Organics. So I'll be sending out some kind of way we're going to, raffle that off in the coming I would say week. I want to thank our partners, and these partners are our speakers and the organizations that they work with, and they have really contributed their time and their ongoing conversations with me and their preparation, and of course the 3.5 hours here and the prep time. So we really appreciate all of our speakers and the organizations that support them. So this includes Black Futures Farm, Freedom Foundation, Oregon State University, Andrew Millison, Highlash Eco Village, Mudbone Grown, Beyond Organic Design, Blueberry Hill, Blueberry Farm, certified organic, of course, New Era Convergence, Plug Organic, which is the permaculture land users group in Oregon. Plug Oregon, Permaculture Now, Permaculture Institute of North America, Beyond Toxics, Growers Magazine, Black Food Sovereignty Coalition, Abundant Earth Foundation, and the Eco Restoration Alliance. So thank you, everyone. Your support has just been phenomenal, and we are so appreciative. I want to let you know that we will be sending out a post-event survey. We would really appreciate your comments, and actually we've timed it, and it's only 4 minutes. So please participate in that, and that'll help us get some feedback on how to improve this even further. And we have, our intent has always been to have a virtual event, and then the next event, the next set of events is a series of community engagement events hosted by local organizations in Oregon and even virtual events. But the intent is to connect all of you as participants on the ground to meet these people that you've just met with here virtually, to build skills, to learn, to replicate things at home and in your neighborhood, and to help out the community projects. So we really hope that you will let us know about community events, and we'll list them on a specific webpage and send that out after the events. And we'd like to list your events or others you know of. I don't think I'm going to be able to remember every person. So unfortunately, I will have to do some kind of acknowledgement in the follow-up email to our team. We have been planning this series for 2 years, and planning and hosting this series for 2 years. And this series is now just over a year old. And there is no way that this event could have happened without our team. And that's our team at Bio for Climate, of course, and also our team of volunteers who have been working with me for 2 years on this event series. So I want to let you know that there's a whole village of production masters behind this. Our next event, as I was mentioning, is in Toronto, Canada, which is my hometown. And so I'm very excited about that. And that will be in the spring. And so we'll be getting information out to you about that. And we hope that you'll join us there, and also connect with us and let us know, your feedback on either people you know and great speakers we could host, or other ideas you have. Now, before I go to thank you, I have to go to my other slide deck. Like I said, I had some technical difficulties. Here we go. I want to just share with you about our Bio for Climate programs. And we have we host educational courses. We host the lecture series. We host the Miyawaki Forest Planting Program, mostly up in the northeastern U.S., New England area. And we have many experts that participate in teaching our courses. So I wanted to just tell you about two courses that are ongoing right now. And I'm going to skip to Jim's slide first. So Jim's has a series of courses called Biodiversity, and he's in his 9th course right now, and he's still teaching it, and you are welcome to join. It's in the middle of it, but you'll pick up fast. It's a whole team of followers that have been working closely with Jim for 9 courses, as you can imagine. You have a choice of either noon to 2 or 7 to 9 on Wednesdays every week. And we also host the authors of the books that we study. For example, Judith Schwartz will be speaking, Fred Provenza, and so they join the course. So you actually get to talk to the book authors live of the books that we study. Let's see, here we go. Christopher Haynes just started his course called A New Climate Story, and that's on Mondays, either midday or evening, and you have your choice. And he's also listing the books that he's studying, and we have authors visiting the class from those books as well. Our program, we just hosted a premiere in Boston for our new movie. We have a movie, which is very exciting. John Feldman produced a movie and learned everything he knew basically from Bio4 Climate in that, and then he went and interviewed people around the world. And so you'll hear the expertise of leaders around the world and see examples of how communities are launching these initiatives, especially all the permaculture recommendations, many of the permaculture recommendations, but a lot of the strategies that Jim Laurie has been shared earlier in the panel. So our movie's called Regenerating Life: How to Cool the Planet, Feed the World, and Live Happily Ever After, which we all would love to do. And so you can now, because we've had the premieres, you can now host a community screening, buy the DVD, or stream it at home. And our Miyawaki program is hosted by our very own Maya Dada. And our former compendium editor, Hannah Lewis, she wrote a book called The Mini Forest Revolution. We highly recommend it. And that's actually how she discovered the Mini Forest, the initiative of the Miyawaki Forest program, because she was doing research for the compendium and discovered this and started taking a deeper dive into it. So Maya has been launching mini forests in the Boston area, greater Boston area, Cambridge. And so we are hosting local mini forest plantings, Miyawaki forest plantings, throughout the Cambridge and Boston area. And we are expanding into the Northeast, and we're on a mission to really engage underserved communities in participating to launch these forests. So we want you to invite you to join us, and also to launch mini forests in your neighborhood. I think I have covered all those. Did I mention it? Yeah, I mentioned the community engagement events. I mentioned Toronto. And I want to pass it over to Laughing Helen to do our closing blessing. And thank you for coming. And then Melanie and Mariana, if you would wrap it up. Okay, Laughing Helen, are you still here? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. There we are. Thank you so much for being with us, Helen. It's just really been a real pleasure, and just very special and sacred. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It has been an honor to be a part of this collaborative effort. And I feel like there's been a lot of seeds planted today. I know within myself for sure. I'm very excited to continue conversations with many of the people that were here. And just my belly feel really good about everything that has transpired today. I want to thank everyone for coming with their truth. I want to share a very condensed version of a 4-day ancestor story of the Apache people that talks about how we all started as one people. And then we went in 4 directions and became 4 nations of people. And with that, we all took a piece of the truth. And then we forgot. The Star Nations told us not to forget we only had a piece of the truth, that we would need each other to always have the whole truth. And so I feel like what we did today is a piece of everybody sharing their piece of the truth. so that we can mend the medicine wheel, and that we can again come to one truth as one people, one in a unified way. So this next prayer is a frog song, because the frog is about regeneration. And it's one that was gifted to me by my ancestors. It's in English, and I heard everybody speak English today, so it felt good that maybe we sing a song in English of our one language that all of us share at this time. And if you know other languages, I think that's wonderful. And it came to me in Puerto Rico with my Taino people while I was going through an initiation. And so if you pick it up, this is a song that was gifted to me. So if you pick it up, you are welcome to share it. Not all of our songs are this part of the culture, like songs are for a specific thing. But this one I feel is for the people. So I ask you to share it if it calls to you in your heart. I'm going to try to do better with the speaker. I just got told the speaker thing. I'm not a performer or anything like that. So we're going to try to better or point myself towards the speaker. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to learn, I'm ready to know, I'm ready to love, I'm ready to grow, I'm ready to learn, I'm ready to know, I'm ready to love, I'm ready to grow, I'm ready. Are we ready? I'm ready. I'm going to change keys because they told me to sing quiet. I'm ready. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to know. I'm ready to love. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to know. I'm ready to love. I'm ready to grow. Food, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to know. I'm ready to love. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to know. I'm ready to love. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. Are we ready? I'm ready. Thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this community today. And we just, in the closing, let all that is know that what we're doing here as the scheduled function in the physical world is coming to a close. We ask that these things continue in the web to be exposed and to awake and to remember and to be aware, and that each of us have a place in our part and in our truth and in our seed that we carry, and may we grow together the most beautiful gardens that we have ever experienced for all that is. Oh, my damas, to all my relations.
Helen, thank you.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. And so just holding that echo of that quiet place inside us, and just encourage every beautiful person here to find some way to nurture and tap into that as we do our very big work in the world. And so I pass to my colleague, Mayan. Thank you all so much. Mayan, you're on mute, darling.
Yes, I just realized that. Thank you so much, everybody. That was an amazing event. I would like you all to unmute and share one word that describes this event and just say goodbye that way. That would be lovely. Thank you.
Hope.
Bye-bye.
Inspiring.
Big.
Joy.
Inspiring.
Agency.
Motivating.
Big.
Thank you.
Possibility.
Inspired.
Thank you.
Phenomenal.
Thank you all.
Community.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Connection.
A love.
Oh, thank you so much.
Supportive.
Take good
Hope.
care and Godspeed in all our projects.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone.
Thank you.